A few weeks ago, I asked a few of my friends what were their peak or favorite moments in shonen anime. I've basically seen all the same shows they have, but a new personal perspective is always helpful in helping you see something that you might not have initially seen. One of my friends mentioned the Vasto Lorde transformation in Bleach. I was skeptical. On paper, it makes sense. Bleach is one of the big three, one of the most popular shonens of all time. It has loads of hype, loads of cool moments. However, I think the writing in Bleach is particularly lazy in comparison to the other two. The structure of every single arc is more or less the exact same, excluding the first arc and the Fullbring arc. The Fullbring writing was completely different, a murder mystery type story rather than the other arcs, which are all fights and very little plot. Throughout my research for the video, my mind has changed a little. I have an appreciation for the work of Bleach, but my opinion on its writing, however, has not changed. I think it's pretty bad, but that doesn't make the show bad at all. The multi-billion-dollar industry of Marvel Cinematic Universe makes terrible movies in terms of writing. No one can say that those movies aren't fun to watch or a good experience, because they are. They're stupid, there's no plot, they're insanely predictable, but they're funny and enjoyable. All spectacle, no substance. So let's answer this question. Did Bleach fail its story? In essence, I want to cover what Bleach did well, badly, and then my conclusion. And we're going to start off with the good stuff. Bleach from day one was the edgiest edgelord out of all of the big three. And to its young audience, it looked so goddamn cool. I would know. Are you kidding me? Grim Reapers with spiky anime hair? Just say less. Say what you want about Bleach, but its art style is genuinely peak. So many of the newer shows add so much to Tate Kubo. Just compare these two panels and tell me that there is no inspiration drawn here from Bleach into Jujutsu Kaisen. It just looks amazing. These thin, sharp lines and slender character designs are beautiful. Just don't ask him to draw a large boy. Bleach's anime adaptation is the best paced of the big three, and I won't have anyone say otherwise. And this stems from how it handled its filler. The other two properties in the big three, Naruto and One Piece, are crippled by their filler. One Piece, for example, in terms of its adaptation of manga to anime, is going to end up having far more anime episodes than manga chapters. For reference, a usual adaptation of an anime uses 3 chapters per episode. It obtains this by having insanely long reactionary shots from a crowd of people, or they'll reuse the same clip of Marines running for the 19th time that episode. Not to mention the introduction to a One Piece episode is 5 minutes. Meaning that without filler, it's still only at 15 minutes per episode, and if you were to add the filler in there, you've got about 8 minutes of new content per episode, of a 25-minute episode. And Naruto is no saint in this department either. In fact, I think it's kind of worse. The constant and repeated flashbacks, particularly in the ending arc of Naruto, is debilitating. These two methods of lengthening a show are disgusting. It destroys the pacing of the stories. And the worst thing about this is that these are inserted into canon episodes. This isn't content that you can skip over for plot. You are forced to watch these sections of filler because within them is the actual narrative. They inject filler into canon episodes. Bleach, on the other hand, handled this far differently. Bleach turned its filler into separate arcs with new storylines exclusive to the anime. This gave the audience member more Bleach without destroying the pacing of the canon material. If the other shows had done something like this, they would have benefited from it greatly, an insane amount. And some of them have far more plot diversity than the canon arcs themselves. All in all, Bleach filler handled 10 out of 10, and much better than its competitors. The beginning of Bleach is something that I really love. Initially, I would scrutinize it for being slow and a boring episodic tale, but knowing what I know now about the series, I love it for its setup. It's very similar to every other anime opening arc. It explores the main cast of characters, and little by little see their relationship between them grow. Some start as enemies and become allies. They turn into the typical teen superpowered group, the sort of group we tend to see within shonen. These characters carry on with the basic monster of the week format, as they develop their friendship and grow to understand and appreciate one another. You would think that these characters would stick around and stay relevant to the story in its entirety, but with a somewhat refreshing twist, most of these characters serve as emotional support for Ichigo, or just a straight up plot device. Chad, in particular, is used to show how strong an enemy is. That is until he is so weak that anyone could beat him, and he can't even serve that purpose anymore, and he becomes a literal plot device to introduce Fullbring to Ichigo. Outside of this, basically the rest of the character development is seen in fights or through backstories and flashbacks, which is quite lazy, and that will lead us in to what I think Bleach failed in. Arcs feel like a tournament arc in disguise, as the story is simply two groups that break off into many small one-on-one or one-on-two fights that lead to Ichigo fighting the big bad, and these fights are the only ones that actually progress the narrative. And unlike stories like Jujutsu Kaisen or Boku no Hero, the fights almost always end in a swift loss on one side. What I just said does sound like a cop-out and an oversimplification of what it is. When you remove the narrative from each fight in Bleach, boil it down to its structure, the fight itself, and its technical narrative, there's no substance. This problem is present throughout the entire story. Let's look at Uryu's first 4 fights. He wins a fight against Drobo, a simple Soul Reaper, but he does it by unveiling his new tool, the San Ray Glove. He wins his battle with Miru by revealing another tool at his disposal, the Let Still. He wins a fight against an Arrancar by revealing yet another unseen weapon, the Rinrei Jaku. And finally, he wins his fight with Sanurwiki by using yet another weapon that we hadn't seen before, the Seilei Shinder. Each one of these conflicts was resolved by a unestablished weapon. It shows no forward thinking for the character and leads to lazy ass pulls of power. In technical terms, it's a Deus Ex Machina. This isn't exclusive to its characters. Almost every conflict in Bleach is fixed this way. The fight will end with someone revealing a new weapon or technique that we as the viewer have never seen before, and it swiftly ends every conflict, removing any value and having the pre-established knowledge from watching the show for a better understanding of the possible outcome of a fight, because that knowledge becomes null and void when the Deus Ex Machina ends the conflict for you. As I said, this style of fight is displayed in almost every character and makes these fights feel incredibly slow, which isn't helped by the sheer number of them. In Bleach, it feels like Tete Kubo simply creates a wide roster of villains simply because he wants all the side characters to have their time to shine. But when most tend to take the same structure as discussed earlier, this makes certain sections of the material unbearably slow and boring. This is more of a personal gripe, as I know some people do like their little side characters to have actual meaningful fights. There is one character that this structure affects more than anyone else, and it's Ichigo Kurosaki. From the start of the show to the end of the show, Ichigo more or less fights the exact same way, as he always did. The only exception being his Getsuga Tensho. You might want to mention that he has the Fullbring power here. I wouldn't really, because he uses it for a small section of the smallest arc in the show and then immediately never uses it again. It does not affect the overall fights, and I wish he utilized it more in his fights because it would simply look cool choreographed that way and make narrative sense. Compare that to the wide array of attacks that a character in Dragon Ball, One Piece, or Naruto have. Never does Ichigo use his moves creatively. He always just fights in the simple, linear way, like a hammer hitting a wall. And this shows a lack of natural growth with these ass pull power-ups. Instead of showing the development of a technique and a move, we're simply told exactly how strong Ichigo is. It makes me feel like it isn't about the journey, but it is about the destination. But what is Bleach's destination? I don't like talking about Bleach the way I just did. It's coming from an objective view, because no matter how much I critique it, I love Bleach. I still think Bleach's writing is very bland, even when you compare it to the other 2 shows in the big 3. But that's perfectly fine. That's not why Bleach is good, or why I like it. When I talk to a Naruto fan, they talk about the relationships and the traumas the characters overcome. In One Piece, the fans talk about the infinitely expansive world building. But a Bleach fan, they only talk about the hype ass fights. Bleach fights are never evenly matched. Almost every fight in Bleach plays out how a fight in DBZ does when Vegeta is huffing his shit. When he's feeling himself, slapping cheeks, and being a cocky little ass until he isn't. This switch always spins when one side pulls out a new move. So it is literally unpredictable. This way we don't know how any fight will go. That is, without considerable shonen plot armor, that is. But none of these compare to Vasto Lorde Ichigo.
I will protect you! What is that form? Who are you?
Ichigo being completely helpless. We have all experienced it, most commonly experienced in childhood, when we lack agency in the world. Whether it's a school bully, a bully as a teacher, or in worst cases, a bully at home. The trauma of being helpless in those moments at that age can be insurmountable. And as we bury those memories in order to be able to move on and pray that they never come again, we get older. We gain more agency, and the bullies can't get away with what they have in the past. But in this moment, Ichigo was experiencing the total helplessness of being unable to protect the ones he loves. This is the reason Ichigo fights. It's his only motivation that the story has established. He fights because he must. This fight has more ass-pulled power-ups than many in the story. This moment is just so truthful and cool that it doesn't really matter. The visual themes of black and white, of a hollow and a human, blending together as Ukiura becomes more human and emotional. Ichigo becomes a feral hollow. This is one of the few times where Bleach showed us instead of telling us. In conclusion, I don't really think Bleach is a good story, but it's certainly a spectacle.